So just want to welcome everybody who is watching the video and say hello again to everybody who's in the room with us. This session is actually the annual lecture for the University of Southampton's Law and Technology Center, which I am co-director of with Napoleon Xanthoulis. And we are very excited to have with us today actually an alumnus of the University of Southampton, albeit in the political science or philosophy?
Both.
Both, okay. That's what department, working with our colleague David Owen. Jocelyn Maclure is now a professor and the Stephen A. Jarislowsky Chair in Human Nature and Technology in the Department of Philosophy at McGill University. And he will be providing us today with a talk entitled AI Within the Limits of Public Reason. 1 second for the PowerPoint to load up. Well, it's going to be done that way, I suppose. We'll close up the chat so nobody has to see that. And you can just click over one by one if that's okay. All right.
How do I do that?
Just use the mouse.
And then
Click here.
doesn't seem like it's working. Yeah. Okay.
I can do it. If you
No,
want.
no, that's okay.
Okay. Perfect.
All right. So thank you so much, Michael, for this very kind invitation, and especially for organizing such a stimulating workshop. I greatly enjoyed every single talk and papers today, yeah, I guess that the idea for the lecture was to find a way both to prolong the discussions that we had today and perhaps also broaden the topic a bit, because maybe I thought that some people who were not here today would attend, but it doesn't seem like it's the case. So maybe I'll feel free just to keep on thinking about the issues that we discussed during the day. Okay, so works. Right, so we know that AI systems became kind of ubiquitous. We use AI now in pretty much all areas of human life, from the most intimate aspects of our lives to the political sphere, right? We have AI coaches now, AI romantic partners, and we use AI politically in many different ways, and we have to cope with deep fakes now in the public sphere and echo chambers that are partly created by recommender systems and so on. So AI is pretty much ubiquitous, and there are different kinds of AI systems, and I think, as I said today, after Abigail's talk, it's useful, I think, to distinguish between different kind of AI-based systems to see what kind of ethical challenges that they raise. Sorry, I have two screens to manage. That's way too much for me. So these are some of the ethical issues that are being discussed in AI ethics, and I'm talking about the area of AI ethics concerned with actually existing machine learning and deep learning based AI systems, right? Because there's another branch of AI ethics that deals with AI that we may never see in our lifetime, but with AGI and superintelligence and so on. So I'm interested in both set of issues, but I want to focus on the AI systems that we actually use. Okay, so I'm not going to review all these issues. You know them well, but opacity or the black box, the explainability problem, that's one of the most important one that we discussed today. So I don't have to review the reasons why we see these systems as being intrinsically opaque. And as we discussed with Kate also, it's the opacity problem is connected with the fairness problem, because if we do not have access to the kind of reasons or consideration that led to a particular output that was used for decision making, it makes it harder to ascertain whether the considerations were actually acceptable, were they fair, and so on. Right. So many of these, the accountability problem is also linked with the opacity problem. So we need principles and norms that will help us to regulate AI systems, to manage the risks that they create, to mitigate the harms, but also to reap the benefits of the users of AI systems. And what I want to suggest, building on the previous paper that I wrote, is that public reason can provide some of these principles and standards that can help us to regulate AI systems, and of course, especially with regard to the explainability problem. Okay, so let's go back to how Rawls conceptualized public reason, and we touched on some of these issues today, especially in Ruben's talk. And there are many conflicting interpretation of the standards of public reason, but I just want to go back to Rawls and the idea, if one's going to defend a public reason view, I suppose that would be a neo-enlightenment view, hence the winking at Kant in my title. It was also Kant's 300th anniversary last week when I thought of the title. But anyway, a public reason view will be a neo-enlightenment view in the sense that the perspective wants that we find different social arrangements where reason can exert as much influence as possible in the conduct of human affairs generally, including in public debates and in political decision making. Right. So that's in that sense that it's a neo-enlightenment view, and for Rawls, as you can see, public reason is a political society as a way of formulating its plans, of putting its ends in an order of priority and making decisions accordingly. And that's public reasons, right? That's the public reasons as exerted by the members of a political community. It's also the set of standards and capacities that allow society to adjudicate between competing claims, to resolve disagreements in a reasonable and rational manner, right? So that's what public reasons is supposed to accomplish. And I add that public reasons also includes guidelines of inquiry, right? When we reason together about our collective priorities or how to arbitrate our disagreements, we should apply. Public reasons provide guidelines for conducting these inquiries, so principles of reasonings and rules of evidence. So that's among the aspects that public reason includes. So there are different ways that I think public reason can help us in our thinking about how we should govern AI systems. There's one way that I didn't address in my previous paper, but that's something that I'm working on now, is that so we think that public reasons provide principles with regard to what to do with the explainability problem, and I'll go back to that. But one of the other issues that AI raises is how, as I said, it contributes to the creation of echo chambers, right, in the public spheres. AI is not the only responsible, of course. We had echo chambers and epistemic bubbles before AI, but recommender systems that promotes certain like speech acts and content in the public spheres, contributes to the creation and maintenance of ideologically driven echo chambers. And as such, when you're caught up in echo chambers or in epistemic bubbles, I think that T. Nguyen is right to think that we should distinguish them, but in both cases, that will hinder the process of exchanging reasons with others, right? And deliberation cannot really take off the ground if you're caught up in an echo chambers. And so that's that more deliberative aspect of public reason, I think, can guide our thinking with regard to what should we do, how can we tame these effects of AI in the public sphere. Okay, but what I want to focus on is AI for decision making, as we did for the most part today. Okay, so we see in Rawls that public reason is public in three different ways. And I want to stress the third aspect here. So public reason, its nature and content is public, being given by the ideals and principles expressed by society's conception of political justice and conducted open to view on that basis, right? So there are two aspects here. So that's public reason include this reservoir of public reasons. So public reasons are drawn from a political conception of justice. So in principles, public reasons in that sense should be like they are shareable, right? We could, in principle, at least, like other fellow citizens, could accept them, endorse them, or at least find them like legitimate considerations in our political debates, because they're supposed to be drawn from a political conception of justice rather than, say, a comprehensive conception of the good life or other views that are acceptable but are not widely shared in pluralistic societies, right? So reasons are public when they are shareable, or they can, working in terms, we could say that they are, they come from the principles of political morality underlying our basic political and legal institutions. So if you frame an argument and that is justified on the basis of the fair equality of opportunities for all citizens, or if you frame an argument that is seen as derived from a basic subjective right, such as freedom of conscience or freedom of religions, these will be public reasons, right? So maybe some of them are not successful or are not based on accurate interpretation of these, but there is an attempt at least to make public arguments in the language of public reasons. Okay, so the public reason includes public reasons in that more substantive sense. The other aspect in that third point here is that it's conducted open to view, right? So that's a transparency requirement or publicity requirement where citizens have access to the basic reasons justifying different positions. Okay, and I think that we could say that this publicity requirement is a precondition for the exercise of rational agency, right? So at the minimum, citizens must be in a position to understand as much as possible the reasons of justifying the decisions that have an impact on their life, right? So in the public reason literature, that's the intelligibility requirement, right? That's a very minimal threshold. But at the very least, public reason includes, the reasons that are actually intelligible to those who are affected by different decisions. It's also publicity is also a precondition for the exercise of rational agency, because publicity allows each of us to make our own assessment with regard to the normative acceptability of these reasons that justify impactful decisions, right? So they allow for moral judgment. And the third way that it's a precondition for rational agency, and that's something that really Kate fleshed out very forcefully in her Right to Explanation paper, is that it allows each of us to challenge the decisions, to appeal, to seek redress, and to self-advocate, right? And you need to have access to the reasons justifying your decisions in order to be capable of exercising that role and defend your own interests, right? So there are different modalities of rational agency. Okay, so I want to address one point raised by Ruben, and one could say, knowing Rawls' work, that that sounds like a maybe unduly broad interpretation of the norms of public reason. Right. So, as it was rightly pointed out, there's public reason comes with a particular scope, and you find in Rawls this idea that the norms of public reasons apply to so-called constitutional essentials and matters or questions of basic justice, right? So there are other political decisions that we have to make, lots of policy debates and so on, but the discipline of public reason would only apply to questions related to constitutional essentials and questions of basic justice. And now, of course, Rawls elaborates on what this entails. I'm going to spare you these explanations here, but I think that a case can be made for including AI-based decisions, some of them as within the scope of public reasons, and that might converge with Ruben's first proposal, but I'm not sure. We'll see. Okay, so you got these different elaborations provided by Rawls in political liberalism, and he does say somewhere that political discussions of the reason for and against fair opportunity and the difference principles, though they are not constitutional essentials, they do fall under questions of basic justice, so they are to be decided by the political values of public reason, right? So that's pretty straightforward, right? It's hard to misinterpret that passage. So I think that if we want to make the case that public reason does apply to some AI-based decisions, well, I think that we can make a strong case when these decisions are what I personally call ethically high-stake decisions, and that these are basically decisions that have an impact on our basic rights and freedoms, very often protected by charters of rights and freedoms, and decisions that concerns our basic well-being, health, security, and so on. These are all, I think, ethically high-stake decisions, and we could quite straightforwardly argue that they are matters of basic justice, or that they are closely related. Yeah, I think it's pretty clear that the state has a duty to ensure that citizens can exercise their legal rights and other basic rights, that we can all enjoy the protection of these basic rights, and that's one of the state's duties, right? And as such, I think the public reason applies to such decisions, even when the actual agent making this decision is a private actor, when it touches upon our basic interests, including the basic rights and freedoms that we are entitled to, then there's a state duty to make sure that we can exercise these rights, okay? And there's that passage saying that political liberalism affirms measures assuring all citizens adequate all-purpose means to make effective use of their basic liberties and opportunities. So it seems that, at least textually speaking, there's very strong ground for saying that the more expensive conception of public reason is actually vindicated, by how Rawls elaborate the theory. Okay. So, if we accept that, say, more liberal use of public reason, then the normative position is that reasons that supports consequential decisions must be public, so they must be accessible, intelligible, so that we can assess whether they are fair or legitimate, or whether they are derived from shared political ideals, or on other considerations that are not fair or legitimate, right? So that would be the normative view, and that entails that decision subjects are entitled to explanations that are geared toward normative justification, right? Toward the normative justification of the decisions, and that creates, for those who decide to use AI system for such decisions, that create what I call a strong explainability requirement for them. So that's the normative view. Others talk about the right to explanation, and I think that's sound. So that's the normative view. And that's how the norms and standards of public reason can help us to think about the rights of decision subjects and the duties of different social institutions and different organizations. Now, I think that there are very interesting challenges to that normative view in the literature. And I'm interested in two, I think, quite sophisticated challenges, and interestingly, they are interrelated, these two challenges, because both spring from the recognition of the basic epistemic limitations of humans as epistemic agents, right? As epistemic agents, we have capacities, but we have also limitations that should be acknowledged, and I see in the literature two strands that challenge the normative conclusion about the strong explainability requirement. And my answer is that yes, we should recognize and acknowledge our basic epistemic limitations, but I challenge the normative inference that is made on the basis of these limitation. And the normative inference is that there's no right to explanation, or that there's no duty to explain and justify decisions made by opaque algorithms. Okay, so it's normative inference that I find wrong-headed. Okay, so what are these two kind of strands? The first one comes, I think, from cognitive psychology, and it's based on data about how we actually reason in the real world, right? So not reason as imagined by Kant and other Enlightenment philosophers, but reason as including a set of mental and cognitive capacities, and when we use them, when we try to understand how humans actually reason, we see how flawed, limited are these capacities, right? So it's a kind of bounded rationality based argument. So that's the first strand, and the second one is an emerging trend, I think, and I think that Jared maybe could be seen as contributing to that literature. It's more a social epistemology based perspective, and it draws on, I think, again, facts that we should acknowledge, but such as the fact that all of us individually, we are very, very radically epistemically dependent upon others, upon experts, upon different processes and institutions, and that we need to accept to trust others, authorities, institutions, and we need to rely on them when we form beliefs about what's going on, about how the world is, and perhaps also about what we should do, about normative questions. We need to rely, but we need also to learn how to distribute our trust appropriately, right? And that the view is that when we accept epistemic dependence and that reliabilism, then that dissipate that idea that we should require public reasons and explainability and transparency for AI-based decisions. Okay, so now I'm going to say a few words about the first trend, but I'm mostly working on the second one, the challenges that come from social epistemology with some of my PhD students at McGill now. So that's one of our research project right now. Okay, so the bounded rationality argument. So there the reply is often, okay, so yes, it's true that especially deep learning based models, large language models or not, that they are opaque. We cannot, in fact, extract a chain of reasons or arguments that support a particular output. It's not possible, but such models are not significantly more opaque than actual humans, and they are not epistemically worse, right? So there's nothing fundamentally different there. We are also, as knowers and believers and judges, we're also highly fallible. We're brittle, right? You know that some deep learning systems are brittle. Sometimes you intervene on some parameters and it skews the results and so on. But we are also very brittle. The way that we think is quite noisy, also influenced by arbitrary factors, and it's biased very often, and so on. And that given that we, that's basic facts about human cognition, we might have good reasons to want to revert to impersonal, even though albeit opaque algorithms for decision making, right? So that's what we can call the argument from the analogy with the human mind. And I saw that quite sophisticated paper by Cameron Buckner recently. And just as an aside, there's something interesting going on in AI ethics now, where there is more of a discussion that comes with misunderstanding also between say ethicists and value theorists in general, and philosopher of science and epistemologists on the other end. And it's not always the case in other branches or areas of philosophy, but now, for very good reasons, all these philosophers are contributing to AI ethics, and I think that the perspective that we start from, of course, influence our views, and the normative thesis that I advocate for is often challenged by philosophers of science and now some epistemologists, whereas it might be more intuitive for value theorists, but that's just a hunch. Okay, so what does Buckner says in that paper? So he wants to address these criticism of a deep neural network, that they are data hungry, brittle, inscrutable, and reward hack, and rather than learn from real solutions to problems. And quite predictably, that's what the conclusion that he comes up with. So I quote him: "When the same degree of critical scrutiny is directed towards the human side of these comparisons, our minds are also revealed to be black boxes plagued by many of the same vulnerabilities." Right. So for those of us in that domain, that have been in that domain for a few years, it's nothing surprising here. But Buckner has done some excellent work in comparative cognitive, say, psychology, right? Comparing non-human animals with humans and with deep neural networks, and that's, I think, a very fruitful research agenda. and that's the conclusions that he wants to defend in that paper. Okay, so I think that we should, of course, take these counter arguments highly seriously, right? They're very, I think, serious challenges. So I won't review it here, but I'll just take for granted that we all accept, right, the results of cognitive psychology, showing that we very often use non-really rational heuristics to form our beliefs and make up some decisions, right? We're not relying on the axioms of decision theory when we make up our mind and decide, but on some very often non-conscious heuristics. As Kahneman and others have shown, we often use so-called system 2 to rationalize, like post hoc, the conclusions that we form, on a different basis, based on intuitions and heuristics and so on, and we use reason afterwards to rationalize them, right? So that's what these critics of the explainability requirement focus on, and this leads some to think that we shouldn't apply a double standard when we compare both kind of cognitive systems. When we assess them, we shouldn't apply a double standard, right? Our standard should be fair and balanced and so on. So that comes from that very well-known paper by Zirelli and colleague. And I have to say that it's probably reading that passage that motivated me to write my first public reason paper, because I was really shocked by the last sentence here, claiming that the standards of practical reason, so the standards that we use in human societies to make up important decisions, that these standards are, and the kind of processes that they generate, that these are undemanding. So that I was really provoked by this way of seeing human-based decision procedures. Okay, so my view here is that we should certainly not ignore the evidence coming from, say, cognitive psychology, quite the opposite, and that we thus need to work with what we may want to call a non-ideal theory of human reasoning, right? We have to be to factor in all these, like, the basic limitations that are documented in the scientific literature. But as I said, it's what we infer from this description of how we actually reason and think and form our beliefs that I think that is wrong-headed, right? I don't think that it vindicates, in particular, any kind of leniency with regard to how we address AI's opacity problem. And the main reason why I think that these demonstrations are not successful is that I think that there are, like, basic underlying philosophical problems with this line of thinking and this criticism, right? And the first one is that the argument from the limitations of the human mind suffers from an individualist bias, right? So this can be cashed out in different ways. I think that very often it presupposes a form of methodological individualism, right? So we focus on the individual human thinker. So what we do when we try to figure something out, or form a belief about something, or perhaps make a decision about, should I save more now of my earnings for the benefit of my future self? So maybe we're very often irrational when we, when a psychologist put us in the lab and ask us questions to solve logical problems or other tasks that we have, or when we think about our, like, very personal decisions about what's best for my future self. So very often we'll be irrational. And that's true, or our rationality would be quite suboptimal, or at the very least bounded. But the view now is that we can think normatively about what we should do about AI based on our understanding of individuals' modes of cognition, and by focusing, it's a form of individualism in the sense that you study the thought processes and intuitions and attitudes, behaviors of individual agents. Okay, it might also be connected to a particular form of internalism, also where you think that, okay, well, just again by focusing, internalism in the philosophy of mind, where if we want to understand the mind, we can look exclusively at what's actually going on in the mind or perhaps in the brain, and we can focus only on the individual's mental state, and that will suffice. So if we accept the more socialized conception of the mind, as Kate did in the paper that we read for this workshop, I think that it leads us to different conclusions. But it seems that maybe they're presupposing a particular, maybe crude form of internalism. Be that as it may, in the end, I think that the criticism is based on a form of atomism or an atomistic bias, and that's in Charles Taylor's sense. And when I started to work on AI, I had no idea that I would draw on the work of Charles Taylor, but it always creeps in somehow. In the sense that the view is based on a particular picture of human beings as discrete and self-contained entities that do interact with others, but interact, I don't know why, maybe for mutual benefits, but conception of the individual as discrete and self-contained entities. If that's the case, what's missing in that argument is two interconnected aspects of human cognition. First, the social or deeply intersubjective nature of reasoning and decision making, especially within, say, social institutions. It's also missing the institutional character of reasoning and decision making, at least when basic, human interests are at play. This is what is missing from that atomistic picture. So I think that if we want to compare AI and human-based decision making, we need to situate human decision making in the right social and institutional context. So we're not dealing here with solitary agents trying to answer the questions thrown at them by a psychologist. We're actually thinking about different norms and procedures that structures how different agents will interact and how different authorities will make decisions. So that's the right. If we want to compare them, we need to situate human decision making within that broader intersubjective and institutional context, right? And institutions as public systems of rules are precisely designed to engender, benefits based on the social cooperation that is allowed by these systems of rule. And one of the benefits of social cooperation under different institutions is precisely to mitigate our basic epistemic limitations, right? We're not always successful in designing institutions that will mitigate or enhance our cognitive powers, but that's what we try to do, and there are some cases that are at least partly successful, right? In many cases, right, we want the decision procedures to be much more intersubjective and much more deliberative, as Abigail said today, so that we can reap the benefits of actually exchanging reasons with others. So that's the right context, I think, if we want to compare AI-based and human-based decisions. And that's why I think that the argument from the analogy cannot let AI off the hook of public reasons. I think that the standards of public reason can be, in the best cases at least, quite demanding. So I don't have time now, but we could talk. I participated once as an expert witness in a trial on a challenge to Quebec's secularism law, and I was exposed to the different rules and procedures that are designed to make it so that the judge will be in the best circumstances to actually, understand the issues and make a sound judgment on the basis of positive law. So we can think about different examples of how we design institutions to mitigate our cognitive limitations. Okay, so few more points in the last few minutes. So there's, as I mentioned today, I think there's nothing in my argument that means that we need explainable AI, or that we should rely on making AI, intrinsically explainable, or finding other algorithms that will explain the outputs. The argument, it's kind of a deontic argument about what we owe decision subjects, right? And in some contexts, we are owed explanations that can be mobilized to justify decisions that have an impact on our basic interest. And it's actually morally indifferent, how do we generate the explanation? If we can extract actual, real reasons or consideration from the inner working of the algorithms, that's fine. But in the end, I think that's one of the reasons why I'm less concerned than others about the accountability problem in AI ethics. I think that institutions that decide to rely on AI systems should bear the responsibility for the effects of the decisions that they make with the help of AI. But anyhow, in the end, I think it's the organization, the human-based organizations that have the moral responsibility to provide explanations. And my conclusion with regard to AI is not that we shouldn't use AI, or that it cannot be put to good use, but that in most cases, given that there's that duty to provide explanations, organizations should always retain the capacity, expertise to justify their decisions, and sometimes that can mean cultivating human-based decision procedures, maybe in parallel for when there's a controversial decision, or when there's an appeal, and so on. But if that's so, that fits with the view that sees AI at best as kind of a cognitive extender, right? Not to replace and fully automatize human decision making, but to enhance our heuristic capacities. And in many cases, that's why I'm showing that slide. That's a paper written by one of my PhD students, and he thinks that the best case for predictive algorithms for bail decision is to send a signal to a judge, right? So the predictive algorithms predict that, okay, that person would respect bail condition, and maybe we can think it in terms of reflective equilibrium, but so the judge should make his or her own assessment, and if it doesn't match, then that's a reason for investigating further, right? The algorithm is opaque, so you will not extract reasons, but you can review the case, and it gives one more epistemic tool for the judge to make a fair decision. And that's what seems to me, in the given state of actual state of AI systems, that's the kind of the best uses that we can make of AI systems, and that's how it's widely used already in science, right? Doesn't replace the scientific kind of how do we conduct scientific research, but it provides tools that generate new hypotheses and that can speed scientific discovery. So yeah, there were a few other things, but I think I'll stop there because I already went over by a few minutes. Thank you so much again.